start it? Is everything streaming now?
Yes.
Did you say start stream? Oh, everything's streaming now. Oh no. Oh boy. Yeah, it's been live for a while. Okay, back we go.
Perfect. Yeah. Checking all that stuff. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we already started, so. Hello, friends. We're gonna start the work. Oh, sorry. Did I interrupt the conversation? Go on.
Continue.
Sorry. Just kidding. Okay. So, welcome to the second production workshop. Today we're going to talk about scoping, delegating tasks, and scheduling. So, first, before we get started, here is a checklist of things that you should consider doing for your team. The first is get everyone's contact info and make sure they're all added to your server. Establish a first meeting immediately if you haven't. Hopefully you have, within 7 days. Assess the team and their skill level. Get your team members talking. Start discussion on your server. Make things not awkward. Establish a nice environment and atmosphere. Establish official meeting times and a schedule throughout the rest of the quarter as soon as you can. And consider a casual get-together. Like for my team, my very first team, we went to a friend's house and we played Jackbox, and it was a good time. Jackbox is always a good time. Or you can go out to eat. Maybe you can go to round one if someone has a car. Whatever you want. Yeah, it's a good time. And then contact the project manager. Pop quiz, who's the project manager? Alrighty, good job. Contact the project manager if a team member is unresponsive. I'll either give you their contact information, which is their number and their email, or we'll consider replacing them completely. Honestly, if they don't reply but by the end of the week, I'd consider just finding someone to replace them right away so everyone knows what's going on from the get-go. And also, if they don't respond within like 5 days, they're probably unresponsive. And it's very difficult to have a good, steady team with someone who is better responding, I guess. But yeah, if you would like another member, we do have a wait list. You can contact me if you think you need, I don't know, maybe another programmer or a writer. I can check to see the wait list to see if anyone has applied. If there is a concerning team member, you can also come to me, or you can go to the HR contact survey thing that I don't know exactly what it is. Yeah, what he said. Or if you need any advice in general, I can direct you to the best officer or admin member in the office, the council, for that. But yeah, now we're gonna get started. What is scope? Anyone have an answer for me? No one wants your answer. You already know what.
Oh, I see land.
Anyone else who isn't an officer? Because all the officers should know. Hi.
So scope is sort of like how feature dense you want your game to be. Mm-hmm. So like a game with like big scope would be like, hey, in the period of maybe 2 weeks, we're gonna make Final Fantasy. Mm-hmm. Whereas like small scope would be like, we're gonna make a battle simulator that like is the outline of a small part of this game.
All right.
It's what's really so.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Garrison got it. The basic answer is it's the vision of your project and what you and your team want to include in the game. This slide was made last year. I like Garrison's response better. But yeah, it's consider the time allotted along with the density of the game. And things that affect your game scope is the quality of the graphics, whether it's 2D, 2.5D, 3D. 3D is typically harder than 2D games in order to make assets at the very least. Genre, if it's an MMO, that's going to be very painful compared to a side-scroller. Mechanics, an inventory system is difficult to implement compared to just jumping and having puzzles based on landscapes. Number of players supported, we highly recommend not doing that because it's difficult. Hours of gameplay, you can expect to make like 5 to at most an hour within a 10-week game project team. And yeah, take all those into consideration. An example of a game that is in scope is I want my game to be a 2D side-scrolling adventure game with a simple crafting system in basic enemy AI. They have their graphics, their genre, their mechanics, the number of players supported, and the rough graphs above the gameplay. But yeah, so why is scope important? Because people are motivated by progress. How it's going to be is right now everyone's excited to get started on their new game, and they're excited to learn programming and everything. But once the quarter goes on and they have their academics and people stop showing up and you realize that programming is hard and that people suck at communicating, it just goes down and it's not a good time. So you really want to make as much progress as you can within these first few weeks, because that's where all the motivation is going to be at, I guess. And it's hard to pick the pace back up once it's fallen down, unless you're a really good public speaker and you spark motivation and encouragement. It's difficult. So being ambitious is wonderful, but remain realistic. You have a small team of college students for 7 weeks, not a professional, dedicated, paid team. If you're in the game industry, yeah, sure, people will keep working despite it being long, but that's because they're being paid. You're not being paid here. This is purely driven by passion, by motivation, by progress. So please make sure that you assign things where they see progress. And that leads into our next slide, which is adjust scope to suit your team's skill set, okay? Because if they hit a problem and it's very difficult to solve it, then they're not going to have this boost of morale, right? It's not going to go back up. It's going to stay down, and they're going to be upset, and progress is going to be halted. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you, that's not it, let's go back. You want to make sure that you give the team members mechanics or assignments that they won't take a long time to complete at the very beginning. Once they realize, yeah, I'm making progress, yeah, I'm getting better at this, yes, I can do this, then you can work up from there. You want to give them the push that they can make things work, rather than forcing them to do something difficult and finding the solution right from the get-go, because it's hard, I guess. So, what's considered a practical game? Something that can be done in the time allotted. Think small, then once your team's completed everything on their to-do list, slowly introduce more mechanics. We mentioned before to think of the bare bones during the last general meeting. You want to focus on the bare bones and then polish from there. You want a YouTube masterpiece over a Hollywood flop, basically. And then some ideas for that are a 2D top-down adventure game with simple enemy AI and 2 to 4 levels, a 2D side-scrolling horror game with simple enemy AI and 3 puzzles, 3D FPS with a single rudimentary map, and realistically maybe like 2 different mechanics. And it's not only programming that you have to consider the skill level for. If you have a puzzle game that's very, very, very designing heavy, especially if you want multiple levels. So puzzles, 3 puzzles, that can actually be pretty difficult if you have a designer who's new to it. Really think about each department and what they're comfortable with. But yeah. Alright, proper scope varies by the team. To properly do it, you have to properly discern skill level. And I capitalize properly because just because they tell you, yeah, I can do this, don't believe them right away. They may not be able to grasp the complexity of a mechanic. I know that for a puzzle horror game, once they thought, oh yeah, I can make a scene, oh yeah, I can do an inventory system, it seems pretty straightforward. But once I asked the skilled programmer about this mechanic, he's like, yeah, no, do not give them that, okay? Give it to me, give them the menu, I'll take care of it. So be pessimistic when it comes to your team members, especially if they don't have any experience in their department. A good way to discern whether or not the intensity is good for your members is to ask an officer if you're uncertain. Like for me, since I don't know anything about programming, and since you're all aware of now, I'm a bio major, a filthy bio major, I had to ask officers about, hey, how's this mechanic? Hey, what is this Unity thing? And is this okay for my little programmers? And they really sized it down for me. So I highly recommend doing that to the departments that you're less than experienced with. And once you get their skill level and mechanics, you also have to make sure there's flexibility in your schedule once you make the little to-do list and your scheduling. Because you know things are going to pop up. There's going to be midterms, there's going to be family emergencies, there's going to be sicknesses. Chances are your team members are going to miss a meeting at least once or twice or 3 times throughout the quarter, hopefully not 3 times. So make sure there's flexibility and that they can finish their game before week 10 or week 9, right? Because, again, back to my horror puzzle game, we were working on the game 15 minutes before the meeting. And that was very, 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 very stressful. And I do not want to experience that ever again. And I don't want anyone to experience that ever again. So please leave room at the very end. You want to finish your game before week 9, 8? I'd say 7?
I'd say by week 9.
By week 9? Okay, yeah. Because
For polish.
You definitely want to leave time for polish, which is playing through your game and making sure that there are no glitches. For when you click on a button and you realize, okay, it's not doing anything. Why isn't it doing anything? But yeah, always leave flexibility, always leave time for polish, because you don't want to be up to your eyeballs in work. And when you're stressed out, then your motivation decreases and you want out as soon as possible. Basically, if you're stressed, you're not having a good time, and why are you doing something if it's not a good time? You want it to be a good time. That's your goal, or your team members. Okay. And that's scope. So, are there any questions about scope? All right. Delegating tasks.
All right. This will be led by me. If you don't know by now, my name is Irvi, and we're going to be going over delegating tasks. Essentially, deciding who gets to do what in your team. Oh, question?
I have a question on scope. If your entire team is very adamantly heading for a scope that is fairly obviously very large, what's the best way of handling that? Just trying to get everyone to calm down a bit and say, hey, let's go for a smaller scope.
I recommend putting it into perspective. And just showing them, hey, these mechanics, it's going to take this much time, and your skill level, well, that's me, don't say that. Just be like, just lay it out how much time it's going to take, how difficult it is, the little steps to make it, because I'm assuming that it's the mechanics that are overscoped. Just bring it into perspective. And then I guess you could barter with them, be all like, okay, we can do this, but first, let's do this, this, and this, I guess. So you can still get your scope down game. And then once you're done with that and having an actual game, then they can have their way and then build up on that, which is pretty much what you want to do, right? You want to have the bare bone basics and then work up from that. But yeah, just put your foot down, tell them, yeah, this ain't gonna work. I'm really sorry. This is why it won't work, and this is what I recommend that we do. Please trust me. And you can kick me in the face if you're unhappy about it, but this is what has to be done. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
Kick you in the face.
Yeah, I do have sometimes.
Okay, so anyways, task delegation. So producers, one of their primary roles is to determine who gets to do what within your group, as well as they decide how long it should take for these tasks to be completed. So this is just a general preface as what we're going to be talking about, but a very key idea that you should keep in mind when you're thinking about deciding who gets to do what is that you make sure that you're not being very bossy and that you're being very respectful of your teammates. So, like I said, you aren't their boss. In fact, you're supposed to be the one who's going to be guiding them throughout the project. So so you should be respectful in terms of what they might have planned. For example, like midterms or finals. You should try to be accommodating for them and not try to pressure them into getting certain things done. However, that's to an extent, but I will go into that later on. So to start off, so the first thing you want to think about when you're thinking about assigning tasks is to first analyze your team, as well as the amount of time left within your project. So, so for each meeting, when you're thinking about what to do next and to assign what to, or a particular task to each person, you first want to establish what's the current state. So this means, for example, for your first meeting that you're going to be having, you really want to establish the skill levels for each person within the team. So that would mean checking with all your programmers and having them lay out to you what they think they can accomplish within like the game project, like how familiar they are with Unity and stuff. But eventually, as it goes on towards later project, or like later on through different weeks, once you start implementing certain features, you want to think about what exactly has been accomplished, what has been completed, so that way it can influence how you're going to go about accomplishing the next set of tasks for you to do. And like I said, try to keep in mind the time remaining in the quarter. As of right now, it's like week 3, and so with midterms and finals in mind, then you realistically only have about, I'd say about 5 weeks of development. So it's a lot less time than you might think, and so you should definitely keep that in mind in terms of the scope of your project. And as well as when you're thinking about the tasks that need to be done, you need to firmly establish how complex they might be. As Kiara said, a full inventory system might be a lot more complex and takes a lot more time, whereas something as several UI programming should be something simpler that can be done within a few days. So you want to make sure that you know exactly how long it will take to accomplish certain tasks. And if you don't know that, then like Kiara said, then there's people you can reach out to ask and seek confirmation as to what, so that you'll know how long it will take. And then finally, you will assign your task accordingly, in which I will go over in the next slide as to what that might mean. So when you're assigning tasks, the first thing that you might want to consider is what your teammates might be desiring to do. So, in this club, we like to emphasize and encourage student game developers, like their desire to grow as a game developer. We want you guys to push yourselves and learn new things. And so we try to accommodate for that. And so that way, you're not just stuck doing the same thing that you already know, but rather you learn something new. And so here's a quick example of like a particular scenario in which you are deciding to delegate particular tasks for a project. So you have a group of 5 teammates, and there are 3 programmers, 1 designer, and then you yourself as a producer. And the project that you guys want to make is a 2D platformer that is about an anteater trying to find a particular anthill. So what this means is you will want to implement, or you guys plan out what you want, and you guys decide to have 3 levels, 3 different enemy types, and various simple platformer mechanics such as running, jumping around, and attacking. So with that in mind, the tasks that follow for this project would be to get art, which would mean requesting it from ArtStrike. That is something that you can do. 2 would be to design those 3 particular levels. And then finally, 3 and 4 would be to program the enemy AI as well as the player controls and the world interactions. So now the question for you as a producer is for who should get what particular task. And so let's say, like I said, you first want to evaluate if any team members have particular preferences as to what they might want to do. So for example, let's say one of your 3 programmers, they want to focus on audio implementation within the game. Then you can, oh, that's for audio design. Well, they can add that on too. because the mechanics are fairly simple. And so, but also if they are interested in audio and would like to do audio as well, and if then they can do so if time permitted. But let's say you have two other programmers, and one of them says they want to work on the player controls, while the other one wants to work on the enemy AI. Then, depending on their skills, they can go ahead and do that. Player controls are typically much more easier, whereas enemy AI can be a little bit more complex. So you could assess their skill level and see if they are up to task for that. And if you feel like they might not, then they can definitely they can still contribute to be to the development of some parts of the enemy AI if they really want to, as long as that it's manageable enough for them to be able to accomplish, and that some other skilled programmer might be able to take up that task. And then finally, your designer will obviously be designing the 3 levels, because level design is much more complex for a platformer for it to be engaging, so they will definitely be spending all their time for that. So that would be like an example in which how you might delegate tasks for a particular project. So important things to keep in mind is, like I said, everyone comes from a diverse set of skills and backgrounds, and so you just want to keep that in mind. For beginner programmers, you want to assign relatively easier scripts, whereas more advanced programmers, they can tackle on the more challenging ones. However, for scaffold projects, most of the programmers are going to be a little bit more on the beginner's side, so that just means that for those more complex tasks, you should just expect for them to take a little bit longer and to be okay with it, with them struggling through it, because this is ultimately a learning experience for all of you guys, and so that you can further develop your skills within game development. And there's just a quick note about how the roles of members within a team might change throughout a project, depending on what is needed. Might change the way in which a person might be contributing to the team. For example, if your team is really lacking in terms of art, and one of your programmers volunteers himself to want to sign up to do for that, and there's next to no really heavy programming features that need to be implemented, then they are completely okay with doing that. Any role can do anything as long as you guys are on track, because like I said, this club, you're just here to try out and learn anything regarding game development. So I wanted to do a quick activity for you guys to sort of engage you into the sort of thought processes of trying to decide what needs to be done within the project. So right now, I want you guys to imagine that you guys are making a 2D platformer. So the first thing I'd like you guys to consider is, what are all the sort of mechanics you would have in a game like this? So what kinds of mechanics would the player need? What kinds of mechanics the enemy would need, and the world and the world interactions. So let's start off with the player. What kind of mechanics would a player need in a 2D platformer?
Jumping and running.
Yeah. Okay. So basic locomotion for movement and the physics. What about enemies? What kinds of... Try to break down what exactly would an enemy AI need within your game. Any ideas?
Choose someone.
You raise your hand. So
An enemy movement script and such, as well as a hitbox as well for interactions and stuff as well.
yeah. So
And also, if that's the case, then you also have to have a death script if there are enemies for your player, or a health script as well.
Exactly.
Because if you're adding in more mechanics, you have to add more mechanics for other things as well. Sometimes they come intertwined.
Yeah, so with the introduction of enemies, then you would need to consider more things about how it would interact with the players, such as if it collides with the player, then does the player die? In that case, then a player would need like a death script, or they need something to handle collisions.
Which then also causes a respawn script as well.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of things you need to consider. And then for the world interactions, anyone have anything to throw out? Yeah?
The world would move.
What do you mean the world would move?
Well, actually, no. Yeah. For a player on a 2D platform, when it gets to the side of it, the world would shift.
Okay, yeah, so you're talking about like parallax, so some visual programming so that it looks good and makes sense that for the world to be shifting as you are progressing through it.
Collision boxes?
Yeah, exactly. So collision with the tiles and maybe like buttons so that like if a player like jumps on top of one, then it will be pressed down. Various things like that. So
Say something real quick.
yeah.
Okay, so is anyone here like completely new to game development? Like this is your first Keegan. Okay. So basically, this is something I had to think about when going through how to think about mechanics and how intense it is. Like, for example, my game wanted an inventory system. Okay, how difficult is that? Think about everything that happens when you interact with the mechanic. Like, for example, for an inventory, okay, when I go to the item, I have to be able to click it, and then it has to be able to disappear. That's one thing about it. After it disappears, it has to go into my inventory. That's another thing. After it goes into my inventory, I have to be able to click it and have it be able to interact with things. That's another thing about it. There's so many steps to basic mechanics, right? Why are you looking at me?
Say inventory.
Say that thing again.
Inventory?
Inventory.
Inventory?
Yeah.
It changes. I'm sorry. Why am I being bullied? It's fine. I'm
Yes.
used to it.
So task delegation, it's really about breaking down mechanics into the simplest actions possible. What exactly needs to be programmed? So, for example, clicking a button, and all the various things that she mentioned. It's about making those smallest units of action and being able to assign them accordingly. So now, so this is your turn to think about the scoping of and the task delegation of this current project scenario that we had drafted up. So right now there is a puzzle side scroller that is being developed, and your team consists of 3 completely new baby programmers who know next to nothing about Unity and Git. You have one new writer as well as 1 new designer with some programming experience. And so the current scenario is that it is currently week 6 and that you have 4 more weeks until you have to present your game. And as of right now, you have only some basic UI and walking completed. And then right here is the list of remaining tasks that need to be completed, or sort of the remaining tasks that you had set out to do in your game design document that you still need to do. So the basic question is this game in scope?
No.
Yes. Yeah? You think so? Oh yeah.
Just don't sleep. And you
Oh, yeah,
do it
just
every
get
single
Louis.
day. Yeah.
Obviously the answer
It's only a few items. It's no big deal. It's only that many methods.
yeah. So obviously this game is not in scope. Oh. Yep. So, oopsie. What, as a producer, what are your steps to making sure that this game gets pumped out relatively complete, given the time constraints and the abilities of the teammates and what you have so far? Okay. Any suggestions?
Kind of like figure out, like, of the remaining tasks, what are the most essential ones, and kind of like separate those from like the extras.
Exactly. Yes, that is a very important concept in production. Is that you need to be able to filter out what is exactly necessary in order to get your game across versus what are those things that are nice to have. So do you have any examples as to what would be things that would be nice or essential versus things that would be just nice to have?
Anyone?
Yeah.
I would drop the cutscenes, the
Definitely.
inventory.
Yes.
and then some of the others depending on what the actual goal of the game was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
I think climbing would be, I think it'd be more difficult because you're working at a vertical axis,
Mm-hmm.
whereas if it's just, side-scrolling back and forth.
Okay. Okay, so keep in mind that it is a puzzle side-scroller. So, obviously, the main thing that you might want to have to make it a puzzle side-scroller versus just a regular side-scroller is to make sure that that your puzzles are implemented, which is not there. Okay. That was a bad second.
There is designing, so.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the level can be the puzzle, I guess. But yeah. So the basics. What about pushing and pulling? Do you guys think that might be essential for like a puzzle side scroller, or not?
Maybe just pushing.
Okay. Yeah, pushing.
As the interaction between.
Exactly. So, in a game like this, you'd probably want to have, with the remaining time you have, at least one player interaction with the world, the way in which they can essentially be able to get through the stage to begin with. So, we can reasonably rule out cutscenes like you had mentioned. Definitely inventory, if they're going to have any item interaction in any way, it'd probably just be like one item they pick up. And as well as some of the several mechanics within it. Designing, they're going to completely focus on designing at least one level. And then, what would we do for writing, you know?
Well, I mean, we don't have any authors, right?
Yeah. That is
no, they can still write. It'll just be like a cutscene at the very, very beginning, or like a chat bubble. Oh, we'll figure it out.
Just
I
a
guess-
black screen of
Yeah,
white text.
exactly.
just like
Yeah.
a page of lore.
Yeah.
Remember
At the
Spinball?
At the title screen.
Spinball.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, anyways, so like you guys had mentioned, the main concern, or that I had mentioned, the main concerns for this would be the remaining time, the skill of the programmers, as well as the amount of complexity of the remaining tasks. So therefore, the necessary solutions would be to define what is necessary, and then to scrap or put aside everything else, and then to have the designer try to finish up the level as soon as possible. That way, because mentioned before, they have some programming experience. If they are able to get the design out, then they can help out towards more of the programming tasks that need to be completed. And then for the level design, in terms of the puzzles, try to stick with one form of interaction. That way, it simplifies how you design that particular level. Oh, okay. So no. Okay, so we already did that. So, some main tips and takeaways from delegating tasks is to focus on the core features of the game rather than the nice to have, and then in terms of defining the task, it's better to be super straightforward. So, for example, requiring, like an example of a task to have within your game is to require for an item to drop, disappear, then move to a specified location. Requiring enemy AI to be able to path like back and forth motion. Things like that. Things that are direct. Because if the tasks that you give and your teammates are not direct... Oh.
Back, sorry. That was actually... I made this slide so it's a bit difficult, but basically that example was to show that picking up items was not straightforward. Therefore, you don't want that. An example of something that is straightforward is pressing up makes you move up. So that's something that's very easy to implement. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I just... For some reason, I just understood.
Yeah, I didn't explain.
Okay, so, yeah, you want to have straightforward, clear, easy actions. Because if it's something ambiguous like just enemy AI, then if you're a new, like, beginner programmer and you are assigned with this task, you're going to feel overwhelmed because you have no idea where to start with that. So you want to start with the most simplest interactions, like some of the examples that we had said. And so one last tip that's super beneficial for being able to delegate tasks efficiently is to be more informed of the production of the video game production pipeline. This means trying to understand how exactly programming works or how art is being made, because they help you make better decisions about delegating tasks. Because like Kira said, if you're not particularly into, if you're not within like game dev, then it's really hard to make decisions as to what people can or cannot do within a reasonable amount of time. So the best way to go about that is to go to other workshops about different departments of art, programming, audio, writing, etc. You can also look at YouTube tutorials as to like how to how a sprite is made, or you can just ask other people, ask some other officers, or maybe ask to sit in with one of your teammates and see their sort of process and how they make things, so you can understand how they work and thus be able to make better decisions for them. But yeah, that's it for delegating tasks. Does anyone have any questions so far? Yeah.
So does production do like the art stuff? Like, do you have to request for the art strike teams to do stuff? Because we don't have like artists on this team themselves.
Exactly. So producers, they will be the one who's handling the request to art strike regarding
audio.
In the team
And audio.
lead channel, I don't think, if you're not a team lead, then you're not invited to the channel. But the team lead of your game is in a team lead channel, and in the pinned posts there are links to both the audio strike and the art strike forums. You're going to have ask them for access to that, but you get your access through that. And by the way, the earlier you submit those, the faster you'll get them. So I recommend getting your art and audio listed out as soon as possible, so you can submit it and you get your assets right away. Whereas if you request them week 6, then you have to wait for them to finish all the other arts and audios on their wait list, and you won't get your art assets until they're finished, which could take a long time. So strategy, submit it right now.
Don't wait until the last minute.
Yeah.
Don't be one of the teams who realize, oh, we need art for a game, and now we know what exactly kind of art we need. Plan that ahead of time, because you're most likely not going to get it at the end. Yeah.
Didn't you guys say there's also like an art like compendium that you guys like have?
Yes.
Or, like,
There is the art repo as well for very general kind of art that you can just pick and see if there's any that you could use. Just be sure to credit the people who make them, as well as all the other art you get from ArtStrike. But yeah.
And that is accessible through the Discord in our repo channel.
Yeah. Okay.
And some channel, I don't know.
Because if you
Resources,
can also search it up in the top right corner, search up the VGDC art repository, and you can find it there as well.
Yeah.
If you want after workshop. I can
Any
share
other
it.
questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're gonna talk about scheduling.
Also, a little caveat. Also after my section. But yeah, scheduling. Making sure you're planning ahead and how to do that properly. We talk about all this scope, all about delegating tasks, but time is so important. How do we use that efficiently, really? So the importance of scheduling, of course, is planning your activities so you can always achieve your goals, of course. Really understanding what you really realistically can do. It's 5 weeks. It's short. It's probably going to spend probably 2-3 hours per week. So at most you have, at the very minimum, 15 hours. You could put more, but that's up to your teammates. So you gotta have that enough time for those essential tasks, and kind of being able to handle those unexpected moments where, oh wait, we might want this extra, like this mechanic, or if to make it feel more fun or something like that. And that's something like where, oh shoot, how do we incorporate that? Do that adds extra time, that extra scope, and everything else along with that as well. Avoid taking on more than you can handle, as we said before. Having that extra, overload and stuff like that will really decrease morale for your teammates. So you want to be able to probably be efficient about it. Yeah. And then also achieve a good school, hobbies, and life thing, because we're not doing things we're doing things besides game dev as well. Like I do work out with these nerds and some other people as well once a week. I used to do D&D every weekend. I did like 2 other club stuff, and then classes along with that. It's a lot. So the thing is time is the one resource we can't buy, and we often waste it. Efficiently scheduling will help you be able to properly use it and save every minute, and essentially to keep you on track. So how do you schedule it? You may take several steps in order to gather information, to properly schedule your team, interview your teams and groups. Like I said, you already scheduled meetings, for work meetings and in-person meetings for communication and such. Like you said, also interviewing the experience for type A of game. And also reading up on the latest like technology and methods. I'd say like finding documents with supplementing your teammates to work on stuff helps a lot. Like the Unity documentation for certain mechanics. If you break it down and break the stuff, you can find stuff on Unity and help give it to your teammates that might help them with that later on. I remember doing stuff for like looking up things for level design and other stuff because we didn't have a designer for our team. So I had to pick up the role and I had to look up Unity documentation for myself to help to supplement that. And yeah, being intimately familiar, like as Irvi said before, knowing each task will help you be able to say, okay, how much time can we put for this, for how many hours can we put on these mechanics. Sorry. And then the tools you can use. I have some examples of some things Trello's I've worked on and some Google Sheet stuff. The Google Sheets is actually a thing from another producer I talked to at SGDA, which is a student game developer association. This is I'll talk about those things later. But this is the Boy Baby GDD. This was the game we did for platform, the Trello we did for. Yes, Keegan?
SGDA stands for Student Game Developer Alliance.
My bad. I said association, didn't I? My bad. All right. What? Oh yeah. So for the Platform GDD, I kind of made we kind of organized it into different to-do lists with categories in different sections like art, backgrounds, what was currently in progress at the time, and then whenever we finished that, we always put it into the finished category or in the testing and debug. So like if we finished it, honestly, this should have been here, honestly. I don't know why that was moved. But we would put, when I was in progress, we put it here, made sure it was tested, made sure it was good, and then we put it in the finished category. And that was for like dialogue, that was for UI art, that was for dialogue boxes. I think we also had some prototypes for like the movement controllers and everything else like that as well. And that was, like I said, supplemented with last workshop about the game design document and everything else like that as well. But that was for just a game jam. So this was a project that was only for 3 days, Friday to Sunday. We have one proto game jam coming up this weekend. It's from it starts at 6 p.m. I think on Friday.
Yes, starts at 6 p.m. on Friday, ends at 6 p.m. on Sunday.
Yeah, shameless plug. You should go. It's a good experience for doing production essentially in a couple of days, and it's stressful, but it's fun. And then this is for a quarter-long project. Kind of ideas of kind of how we did this was more things like, okay, we have things to finish by next meeting, things for the to-do list of what was we had all the mechanics that we had all of in there and just put it all in the Trello. And then we just essentially moved some and said, okay, we'll finish this, and this by next meeting. Making the third level, explain how to switch platform and crush blocks, because this game was for, I think, Terraformer. It was a platformer where you essentially were able to build the platforms to get to the location that you need to get to go. And you could use different types of blocks to defeat different enemies to get to the point A to point B, which is I felt like was kind of cool puzzle platformer type of concept. But we had all these things where making the boss level, making drill enemies, making menu correlation to make sure it goes from scenes, breaking all of that down and essentially having that all in the main to-do list box and slowly picking it off bit by bit and assigning it properly to people. Like I said, I think we've already talked about with some people here how to add people to assign members to the cards for Trellos. And personally for me, I'm a huge proponent of color coding because okay, is something easy that we can do? Orange and green and stuff like that is more light stuff that can be finished right away. Or in a week or two, things are red for the block placement UI, which was critical stuff. And then so here's what you call it? My brain is not working. To-do list, things finished by next week. What was in progress during the week, done for the week, was finished, testing and debug, and then everything else was in the archive right here. And this was all the stuff where we start off with everything else to let people know what to do, clone the Git, make sure all the things, basic block types, make spikes, make enemy. Yeah. It was fun. I love all that organization and all of that jazz. And then lastly is Google Sheets. So same concept, but different program. I love this. This is such a clean way to do things, and I saw it during the SGDA thing that I talked about before, where they essentially they broke down all the things in the concept stuff, and had it as well as into what was in progress, what was blocked because you couldn't work on that right now because it wasn't done yet. So things like art assets and collision implementation were blocked because you had to get the concepting finished or design for moving and vanishing for platforms. If those were not done first, you can't do that. So you would like kind of have like this pyramid that you would have things where like in progress, and then you would slowly complete it one by one, trying to essentially getting that like lined out. And then the assignees were the people you would put your names, like the artist would work on this, and then the designers would work on these, and this would be the programmers, I think, for E1 and stuff like that. And then same thing for jumping. Like you could essentially break down the simple platform mechanic that you see and break it down into so many different pieces to essentially make it kind of more digestible, if that makes any sense. That was kind of a lot of a huge, essentially, text dump to you all guys. Do you guys have any questions or stuff? Do you want to go back to other stuff?
Would you ever do both the Trello and the spreadsheet, or just one or the other?
I think it's personal preference. Yeah, it's one or the other, honestly, because you don't need too many. Because if you are checking all these stuff, it's also like, and your teammates are also checking it because they update stuff. It's kind of like a lot. If they have to check the Jello, they have to check the game design document. Then they also have to check the Google Sheet stuff. It's try to keeping it enough where they can like, okay, I can check this up once a week or a couple of days and stuff like that. And then. Garrison, did you have a question? Or okay.
So for Trello, I'm new to Trello or whatever, but
which one? The 2D or Boy Baby GDD? Yeah.
Just whichever.
Okay.
But, so does anything like what's in the box? Is this just purely for scheduling, or does like do files and shit go inside those things?
I mean, I use it for if you added descriptions. I usually use this as just the overall like guideline to-do list for people. So people say, oh, I don't work right now. What can I work on? Oh, there's all these things. I'll just move it here and do it. If your teammates are done essentially.
But, like physical things, like let's say you have art or whatever. Would you put like the art things in the box,
Trello.
or like where does that stuff get stored?
Like the
Do you
art.
put resources in Trello?
Yeah.
Is it just text, or do you put resources in there too?
I don't think so. Do you mean like art, or like what do you mean by like for the when they finish the art submission, you put the art inside
Like
there?
the art or like the music, like would you put the music in that box? Like does stuff go in there, or is this just purely scheduling?
It's purely scheduling. Yeah, because if it's in the submission, you usually put it over send it over Discord, or it already be on the GitHub repository as well. Because you usually have the art, and then you would like send it to the Git commit and stuff like that as well. But yeah.
Usually resources are put into Git, because in the Git everyone has access to it, and it's easily accessible.
Because if you
audio, all that stuff.
Because if you put it in the Trello, then you have to move the Trello and then put it into the file that everyone else is working on to access it as well. So might as well just put it to Git, so then people can access, the coders can access the image and assign it to the stuff.
Alright, I hope you're Git.
Git is important.
Oh, for the spreadsheet, what would you call that format?
I call it a burn down, essentially. You're essentially burning all the stuff, essentially where it says, this is the stuff that's happening, and then you essentially go from left to right, or right to left, I think? Or, no, left or right, back. Sorry, because then deadlines and everything else like that as well. So you go down, and then it'd be up to down, left to right, or something.
Do you know any talks about like this format and how to use it? Documentation?
No, I did take some pictures of the slides of, I think it was Nathan Moore for Blind Squirrel. I think Itai's working in that company now, who talked about it, and like it was essentially, it's like a guide essentially. I don't have, like I said, I don't have much experience with it. I actually want to use it for the next game jam, or next quarter project I'm working on to actually see how it works. So I have more of a personal experience as of right now. But as of right now, I don't. So yeah. Itai is a man. His last name is man, yeah, as well. We'll talk about him later if you want to, but I digress. Now let's go back to here, and then present, boom, and then last tool I would use is Google Calendar. I like calendar apps. I like organizing. I like, as you can see, as a producer, I like to follow my events on there, follow all this stuff. So I forget a lot of things sometimes if I talk a lot. It's just essentially having all of it like scheduled out for things and planning all the data allows you to view an appropriate span of time for all your stuff as well. So you can schedule meetings properly with your teammates if you have separate meetings or things like that, or deadlines and other things like that as well. just in that level of detail that you want to have it put as. But yeah, is any questions or stuff like that? Would you guys want a Google Calendar workshop in the future? It's just like how to use stuff like this or Google Sheets and things like that. Just like how to use the tools better and how to operate Trello better. Would that be helpful for you guys? Just a little question, throw a question out to the audience.
Google Sheets or Trello might be definitely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Just for like getting to like used to like using it really quickly, so we can just like get started instead of like spending a lot of time like figuring it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to put a pin in that and try to hopefully get that in soon, in like a couple of weeks or so. But yeah, scheduling is fun. Making sure you essentially balance all that time for all the other tasks for scope and for delegating tasks as well.
Any general
Questions?
questions? Just like overall.
Yeah, like a review wrap up, I guess. What you guys learned today, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Let's
Wanna
see
go
what
around
we
table?
felt.
Let's go to Kashi.
I learned that we use GitHub to store resources.
Mm-hmm.
Same.
Yeah.
Speaking of things about forgetting stuff, can we go around also saying names and also what you learned?
My name's Takeshi. I learned GitHub. I thought it was a food delivery service. I'll be honest.
Good job.
That's
Dang.
well
Sounds
done.
like, yeah, Grub.
Grub.
All right, I guess we can go insert a clockwise like that. Yeah.
My name is Garrison. I learned about delegation.
My name is Hoyan, and I learned some tools to schedule.
Who are you?
I'm Oscar. I learned more about that motivation chart you showed us.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Marco. I learned a lot about analyzing your team time and scheduling.
Hi, I'm Eric. I learned about the burn down left to right chart. I like
That was a good chart.
I am Randolph. I learned about lots of things.
I'm Kennedy, and I learned that you can stick members on people in Trello.
Mm-hmm. It helps with signing and knowing who. Okay, what am I working on today?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Wait, say your name again. Literally just like no, not you. Sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
Kennedy.
Kennedy. Okay, literally I heard it and then it was like grab it and it's like nope, it's gone. Fuck.
In one ear, out the other.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's not even the president.
But yeah, what's your call it?
We did it.
Yeah.
Today's our
thank
workshop.
you guys.
Mhm.
That was so cool.
Woo!
I'm so good at presenting.
You look so nervous.
Like
Your muscles around your neck are really tense.
Really?
Okay, I'm pushing.
Dude, I have a planner. For like my energy.
I feel like I
My
got
doing.
it.
Like it's
Oh
always
my
your
goodness.
voice came out like okay, but you're
Do you wanna see
you're
it?
like
Really?
kind of
You
like
know
this
my-
like
don't lie
presence
to me.
wasn't all there.
Don't
I'm
lie.
gonna forget it in a couple of
I
weeks
can't
if I don't talk to
remember.
her for a week. I'm not gonna lie.
Bye.
Speaking is a job.
I
It's
know.
hard. Presentations are hard.
We haven't streamed. Whoop.